we know that if alcohol consumption is increased, essentially there's a what ends up happening is it's an interesting trend. So what you end up having is something like this, and then it goes down like this. Well, this is the critical point. So this is called the critical point when toxicity is extremely high. So basically, naturally, the body lowers or dampens the toxicity over time. So if we make the projection, if this is a projection onto another plot function, so let's suppose we have the same time axes, and we're going to define, so in this case, it's still going to be time, but we're doing a projection. And this is going to be toxicity. Of course, alcohol is toxic, but when the it's proportional to tolerance. So essentially, it's going to have a initial point. It's going to be high, or it's when the tolerance is low, it's going to have high toxicity. So it's inversely proportional, and then it's going to go down like this, and really start spiking. So this is critical, because once we get this point, this is what happens. It disrupts the body's ability to sustain equilibrium, but it's proportional to toxicity. So it's toxicity. So if the toxicity is always there, the body has trouble sustaining. So essentially what happens, like if we have like a timeline, or again, if we represent this, and we can let this be equilibrium. So naturally you start here, and typically what happens, the reason we consume alcohol is we naturally we're going to relate this to mood in this case. Mood is related to many things. Essentially, it's related to neurotransmitter regulation. So we know mood is proportional to neurotransmitter regulation plus communication or connectivity. So how connected the neurons are. So essentially, early on, like typically with alcohol, we consume to get like a euphoric, like a positive effect, depending on the trend. But then what ends up happening generally is there's going to be a dampening effect. So it's like going to be a dampening effect, and then usually a slow recharge, so forth. So this is a recharge. So from here to here, we can call this recharge. And so this is just the this is what this distance facilitates the addiction. So we can call this height h. So basically, so if we plot h, this could be time because it's always time. So this is height h. So as height, so if time over time, let's just say linear, just to simplify it. This is like the initial. This is we could call h naught as the initial, and this is the we just call like let's call this h max. Let's say this is the maximum height. So what ends up happening is if we take this height and we're going to compare, so this is h naught is the initial point, and then let's just call this h max. So we make the projection. Whatever distance it is, it's this is it's a vertical distance. So like if we're going to make this like on scale, it would be somewhere maybe around here. So we're going to do the projection. And then this is going to be, we can call this, it's related to addiction. So degree of addiction. So degree of addiction. So with height, if the height is small, the addiction is going to be lower. It should be lower. So basically it's not, it may even be like a function like this. And the reason for this, we don't know the exact function, but it's a direct relationship. And the reason for this is because when the height increases, it's like a force that pulls you in that direction, because you want to experience the maximum euphoric effect. That's something that has never been experienced before. And once you know it exists, you want to get back to that point, because this is in a positive direction. This is positive. This is negative. We always want to go in the positive direction. Generally, it reinforces the addiction. But the problem is with equilibrium now, this height also creates toxicity. So height relates to toxicity. It's a functional effect. So it's a function of toxicity, because we know that toxic effect gives us the euphoria, gives us the feeling of feel good effects. And this is interesting because toxicity breaks equilibrium. We know that toxicity breaks equilibrium. Balance. Why? Because it destroys communication of neurons over time. And this is especially true when the tolerance starts breaking away, and that's when the toxicity becomes very large. So especially during this region right here, it's going to pose a very large problem. And so that's kind of why generally what ends up happening, and this is kind of where this is an interesting thing. So if this were equilibrium, and we kept going, like you go in this positive effect. So let's say you start here, you go down here, it's probably a faster recharge. And then, you do the cycle again, you get higher, you may go again, and it's trying to recharge. But over time, you may not get back to the initial point. So then you start again, and you spike, you get up here, and then it comes crashing further down. And essentially, the recharge may be longer, it may lag longer. And essentially, you may keep creating these cycles, but eventually, this level, it stabilizes at a lower level. So this is like E naught, this becomes equilibrium 1, and eventually as the toxicity builds, so as toxicity tends towards, you could just say infinity, what ends up happening is equilibrium floors to 0. So that's essentially dead, there is nothing left. It tends to infinity, equilibrium tends to 0. Or this is like death. Of course, if you were to actually hit infinity, you'd be gone. But the tolerance kind of dictates the toxicity as well. And then therefore it dictates the effect on. So it's more so about frequency and quantity. So consuming like alcohol, consuming a few beers may have more effect on others, some people than, depending on genetics. You can get alcoholic liver disease or cirrhosis even when you drink small quantities. It really depends on the scenario. So that's why it's very important, because once this drops and this keeps going down lower and lower, so like if you kept going in this direction, and eventually the equilibrium, it keeps going This is like E2. If you keep going and you keep going in the negative direction, eventually what ends up happening is the mood goes, it's proportional to the mood, because this is representation of where the neurotransmitter balance is at. Essentially, it stabilizes at a lower level, and therefore the mood is going to become, instead of euphoria, it's going to become dysphoria. So basically, we could relate it. So like there's an axis. This is a neutral axis. Maybe this is like a normal level, and let's just say this is euphoria, and this may be dysphoria. So dysphoria is like a negative, so this is positive. So dysphoria is in the negative direction, and basically equilibrium is right here, or it's a neutral axis. So if you shoot up here, let's say you shoot up to euphoria, well, what goes up must come crashing down. You may come like to here. So it's proportional to this distance. This distance right here dictates the energy shift. This is an energy shift right here. And that's what disrupts the equilibrium. As you keep continuing these energy shifts, it's causing the neutral zone to decrease. So over time, this neutral zone, like let's just say we 20 years later, let's say heavy drinking. So now the scenario, and therefore when you drink, you may not go high anymore. It may only go up to like here, and then you go even further down. So essentially you're flooring everything, and it's becoming lower and lower. And this is like what used to be, this is like your neutral zone is in the state of dysphoria. That's when you get into like alcoholism and so forth. So this is definitely a problem if it continues. I just kind of want to lay it out, kind of how it works in my view. Of course, these is not absolute. It's going to be different cases, and the trajectory is going to be different. But really, like when it comes down, boils down to this, it's just the body reaches this stabilization or point where the body it just sustains it's not able to sustain that high energy state that you could sustain previously, and you're not able to perform the work and the action. It's all dampened over time if this continues and the toxicity continues and so forth. So to negate this, it's really important to take care of the liver, of course, and I think the damage that's done is going to differ between individuals, of course. So it's more of a case of tolerance. Of course, everyone's going to have a different level of tolerance, but this is definitely it's going to occur at a different rate. The rate of declination is going to be different, but this is an inevitable process, and if the drinking continues. That's just my viewpoint. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.